How about Jeff? Jeff Moore? I haven't seen you, but. Ah. Well, thanks for that. I didn't realize we had overflow. Hey. Now, is Rock Cowles in proximity? I'm sorry? All right, well, very good. Let's see. I want to go ahead and, well, Jeff, come on up. Come on up. We're going to ask you to sit with Bill, Mr. Nettles, former U.S. Attorney for the South Carolina, and Jeff Moore, former Executive Director for the South Carolina Sheriff's Association. Thank you both for being here. The floor is yours.
I'll go first.
Jeff, you got a green light in front of you?
I do. Is that
good? I hear you.
Be closer. The last hearing in the House, the first hearing in the House, one of the opponents opened her comments, basically establishing her religious credentials. I would like to start off by reading from Genesis 2:29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed to you shall be for meat. Now, there are some people who argue that means we should all be vegetarians and eating from bushes. I tend to think that it means the Lord put on this earth all the fishes, birds, and vegetation for our sustenance, which means for medical purposes as well. And in fact, most of your medical medications today are based some way or another on plants. But I'm not here today to talk about the Bible. I'm not here to talk about the science. I'm not here to talk today about my reason. Now, all of you know me. I worked down here for over 30 years on behalf of law enforcement. Senator Hutto and I butted heads on more than one occasion in judiciary. The reason I'm here today is because I have a very personal vested interest in the passage of this piece of legislation. My son, who is today 29 years old, smoked his first cigarette at 12. Now, I've never smoked in my life, but he managed to find a way to smoke cigarettes, which are illegal for a 12-year-old to have. You can't buy them at 12. At 12 and a half, he smoked his first marijuana joint, introduced to him by an older student on the high school golf team that he had made while in middle school. The result was that for the next 5 years, my son basically stayed high on marijuana, a totally illegal drug for anybody, let alone a 12 or 13, 14, 15-year-old boy. But he managed to get his hands on it every day. Every day. And I will agree with the lady who just spoke from Arizona and to the doctors who spoke here a few weeks ago that on young minds, it does play havoc. And it can become, and did become for my son, an addiction. We put him in recovery programs too, none of which worked. But by the age of 18, he stopped using marijuana. And I asked him why. I said, did all those programs we spent all that money on finally work? He said, no. He said, I laid in bed one night asking myself, how did I get so screwed up? How has my life become such a mess? And he put himself into recovery. It's called the U.S. Army. and my son, at 18, enlisted into the U.S. Army. Finished basic training and advanced infantry training at Fort Benning, Georgia in September of 2007. He was ordered to Fort Collins, which was his duty station, in October of 07. He was deployed to Mosul, Iraq in November of 07. He was 18 years old. Now I want to ask you a few questions. Has anybody in here, and I heard the Colonel talk about the bullets ripping through bodies, and maybe, Colonel, you have seen some horrible things. I don't know how old you were when you saw them. But on January 28th, 2008, my son was involved in an ambush where the lead Humvee and his patrol was blown up, killing all aboard. I have a letter that I could read you, but I won't, but I will simply tell you that part of it says, it blew the Humvee up into pieces, and there was nothing but body pieces left. For the next 2.5 hours, those soldiers fought for their lives until finally relieved by an Abrams A-1 tank and an Apache attack helicopter. He was the gunner on the trailing Humvee, the machine turret gunner. He started out with over 4,000 rounds of ammunition. When that battle ended, he had fewer than 300 rounds left. Nearly melted the gun down. He was 19 years old. He had just turned 19 the month before. It was part of a special unit that was to hunt down bomb makers and insurgent arsenals and rescuing other American soldiers who were under fire. His unit received orders to extract a group of U.S. cavalrymen who were outnumbered and outgunned, and his orders were not to let your progress be impeded. This time they left their Humvees, and instead, he was mechanized infantry. They used their 10-ton, 12-ton Bradley armored personnel carriers to carry out the rescue mission. He was the lead driver, the lead vehicle. Came to an intersection, had to make a right turn. As he made the right turn, a small car approached. Now, he had one of two choices. He could stop and let that vehicle pass and hope it didn't carry a bomb and hope that it wasn't there just to slow down the convoy, the rescue convoy, that might come under attack as well. And he remembered his orders. Let nothing impede your progress. 5 fatal words, faithful words. So he proceeded, and he ran over the vehicle, killing 4 people. At the end of the mission, after they had extracted the American soldiers, he was called into his commander's office at his forward base in Mosul and informed that the 4 people he had run over were a mother and a father and 2 children. He was 19 years old, but he did his duty as he saw fit. Later, on that same mission, his unit or his patrol was given the instructions, the orders to clear a particular house that was known to have bomb-making materials and large amounts of ammunition stored within it. His patrol attacked the house. It's not like the police knocking on the door with a warrant and asking if they can come in. They simply tore down, and busted through hard, really hard. The only person they found on the first floor was a young woman in her late 20s, early 30s. No one else. But they heard movement upstairs. They heard furniture being scratched across the floor. His sergeant told my son to take a group of American soldiers up the stairs and clear the second floor. He went up to the second floor, to the first room, took 2 pins out of 2 fragment grenades and tossed them into the room. Upon detonation, they rushed the room, only to find that the only occupant in the room was a 6-year-old girl, the daughter of the mother downstairs. Her body had been shredded, her face blown off, her hair was burning. He put her hair out with a blanket from her bed. They finished clearing the 2nd floor, and then he had to walk downstairs and look at that mother in the face and tell her what he had just done to her 6-year-old daughter. He was 19 years old. He came home a completely broken human being. He was never the same. A year later, he found himself back in Iraq. More of the same. And he came back and made his first attempt at suicide. He eventually was redeployed a 3rd time, this time to Korea, where he served on the Honor Guard of the United Nations Command Honor Guard. This was a reward for his 2 previous combat tours. But it had one thing that Iraq doesn't have: alcohol. And he tried to drown himself in alcohol. 5 days before he was to come home from Korea, 5 days, he attempted his 2nd suicide. The Army kept him in Korea another 6 months. He finally came home, was sent to Fort Stewart, Georgia, to the psychiatric hospital there, eventually to Texas, to a psychiatric program in Texas that the VA runs. Eventually, he was given an honorable discharge and a medical retirement. So he came back home to South Carolina with his wife and 2 children. Depressed, despondent, dysfunctional, hopeless, felt he had nothing to live for. His father-in-law, a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Army, had moved back to Michigan, where he was from. Now, Michigan has medical cannabis, and I want to remind everybody here, right now, we're talking about medical marijuana. We're not talking about recreational marijuana, so I'm not going to give you a bunch of statistics about how much marijuana is consumed by how many people. We're talking about medical marijuana. People who get a medical marijuana card and out of their own pocket buy the product. And after 6 months, he was able to get a medical marijuana card. And that was about 2.5 years ago. And what's transpired in the last 2.5 years? This was a broken young man who felt he had nothing to live for and had tried twice to kill himself. Today, he's in school. He's made the dean's list for the last 2 semesters. He's bought a home. He has joined a church where he's been elected a junior elder in his church. He was asked to organize and run Vacation Bible School this past summer. And obviously, being an infantryman, he designed the Vacation Bible School after boot camp for young Christians. Now, who would take that life back from him? He obtains 1 ounce of marijuana a month. 1 ounce. It's 28 grams. He smokes a 0.5 gram to 1 gram a day because his prescription is only for 28 grams. It's very low in THC, but very high in BD or CDB, which controls his anxieties, his depression, and his nightmares. Now, he does not live the life of Riley, but he does live a life. And I'm convinced that if he had stayed in South Carolina another 6 months, I'd have buried him. 2 weeks ago, I got a video from his wife with him throwing ball to his son, teaching him how to hit a ball. His son's 4.5. how to hit a ball with a bat. It brought tears to my eyes. Because that's what I did with my son. I told him how to hit a bat, or a ball with a bat. And there my son was, alive and well, living, prospering, teaching his son how to hit a ball with a bat. And we would deny that opportunity to people in this state simply because we're afraid of a boogeyman under the bed. This bill is the product of 28 other bills that have been passed across this country. 68% of Americans have access to medical marijuana. 68%. But not here. My son had to go to Michigan. He can't even come home to visit his mother and father because if he does, he's subject to arrest and prosecution for possession of marijuana, which he can legally possess in Michigan. That makes no sense. We talk about diversion.
Jeff, we're at 14 minutes. We're going to have to
I understand.
next slide.
Diversion. Diversion makes no sense. It really economically doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Nor does it make much sense for the person who actually gets the marijuana. I asked my son about it. He said, it's too valuable to me, Dad, to sell it on the street. He pays $200 for that ounce. Our bill puts up to a $5,000 penalty and up to 5 years in prison for diverting your medical marijuana to recreational use. And you lose your medical card as well. For those who need it, like my son, he's not going to gamble that all away. He's got too much to lose, and he knows it. Yes, there are going to be bad actors who do divert it, but there are always bad actors, Mr. Chairman. Whether they're in the General Assembly, members of the bar, members of the medical community, whatever career area, there's always going to be a bad actor. But we shouldn't let some bad actors eliminate the possibility of the relief that my son has gotten from medical marijuana and given him a second chance to live a life that can be as normal as possible. Otherwise, we just tell these veterans who went and fought for us, fought for you, Senator Johnson, fought for you, Senator Corbin, fought for you, Senator Hutto, fought for me, fought for you, gentlemen, in our names, who came back sick and killed themselves or live in a hole. And by the way, Sunday night I got an email from my son. It simply said this: lost another brother too soon. See you in Valhalla. His name was Adam Bryant. He left a boy and a wife behind. That's the 6th person in his unit who has committed suicide since returning from Iraq some 6 years ago.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I'll be glad to.
Can't put a price on the love father has for his son. Senators?
I have a question. Jeff, did your son, in trying to deal with the psychological or the PTSD or whatever the diagnosis was, did he try conventional medications or other medications? How did he come to arrive at cannabis as a way of alleviating the suffering?
Yes, sir. The VA provided him with every psychotropic medication you can imagine. They had serious side effects. He knows more about that than I do, and probably more than a lot of pharmacists do. Matter of fact, I take a clonazepam, 2 milligrams a night. That's a sleeping aid. He said, Dad, you need to get off that. It's dangerous. I mean, he doesn't take any drugs anymore for anything except the medical marijuana. But yes, sir, he tried everything that was available through the normal course of his medical treatment through the VA.